He wasn't supposed to win. Not here, not against him. Not in the heart of Africa, under lights that burned like judgment and drums that echoed like prophecy. But he did. This is not just the story of a fight. It's the story of a resurrection. Of a man who lost everything, his title, his prime, his voice, and came back to change history. Not with brute force, but with rhythm, with faith, with fire. This is Muhammad Ali, in the jungle, against the monster, and everything on the line. It was never quiet in Kinshasa. Not truly, not even at night. The hum of the air, thick with sweat and diesel. The echo of drums from somewhere too far to see, yet too near to ignore. It was the kind of place where you didn't hear silence. You felt it crouching just outside the rhythm. October 1974. The heat pressed in like a second skin. Even the shadows sweated. Outside the Intercontinental Hotel, soldiers leaned against jeeps, pretending not to stare. Inside, fans spun slowly overhead, doing nothing. And down the hallway, behind a cracked wooden door, Muhammad Ali sat cross-legged on the floor, whispering to himself. George Foreman's in trouble. He don't know it yet, but he's already beaten. The room smelled of cocoa butter, ink, and nerves. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, watched from a chair in the corner. Ali wasn't talking to him. He wasn't talking to anyone. Just the walls, the air. God, maybe. The jungle was waiting. Foreman was somewhere else in the city, kept hidden, quiet, behind layers of protocol and paranoia. But Ali moved like he belonged, like the streets were made of his own footsteps. Children followed him, shouting his name. Ali, Ali Bomaye, they cried. Kill him, Ali, they chanted it like gospel. He smiled, waved, fed the fire. He needed it. This wasn't Vegas. There were no neon signs here, no blackjack tables or Elvis impersonators, no suits with headphones calling the shots. This was Zaire. And in Zaire, the fight was something else. A performance, yes. A contest, sure. But also a message, a declaration, a legend waiting to be born. Mobutu Sese Seko, the president, the general, the self-anointed father of the nation, had made sure of that. His face was everywhere, on the currency, on the billboards, on the stamps. But tonight, even Mobutu was background noise. The spotlight was for two men only. One who roared, one who danced. Ali had come for more than a title. He always did. It wasn't about belts, not really. It was about resurrection. About proving that they hadn't buried him in 1967 when they took his crown for refusing Vietnam. That they hadn't erased him when the white establishment called him un-American, unpatriotic, ungrateful. He had returned. And he had returned to Africa. Not to take, to reclaim. Outside, the city pulsed. 1,000 radios played James Brown. Vendors hawked sweet corn and fried goat meat. The stadium, still hours from filling, already buzzed. Reporters from New York, Paris, Lagos, Havana, sweating through their shirts, chasing the ghost of a headline that hadn't yet happened. Inside that room, Ali stood up. Slowly, like someone about to go on stage. He looked in the mirror. "You still pretty," he said. "You still got it. That's the secret. I make 'em think I'm old. I make 'em think I'm tired. Then I sting. I sting when they sleep." He shadowboxed in place, loose, rhythmic, light as air. The floor creaked beneath him. He wasn't afraid. Or maybe he was, and he just wore it better than most. Across the city, George Foreman sat in silence. No mirror talk, no jokes. Just the cold hum of air conditioning and a cut over his eye that refused to heal. His team had tried everything: ointment, stitching, even delay. But the date was set, and Ali was waiting. So he sat in stillness, waiting back. Two men, 2 strategies, 1 fight, and somewhere in between them, the heart of Africa beat steady, slow, insistent. Ali stepped out of his room, wrapped in white cotton, the kind that clung to your skin in the humidity. The hallway was empty. His footsteps echoed. One of Mobutu's guards nodded at him, expressionless. Ali grinned back. In his mind, the ring was already there. The ropes, the lights, the crowd, the round, the rhythm, the plan. He didn't need a bell to begin. He just needed the jungle to listen. The streets in Kinshasa didn't sleep. They shifted. They sighed. They danced under flickering lights, humming with the weight of something about to happen. The fight was still 2 days away, but it already owned the city. Not just the posters or the headlines, the air itself. Down by the river, just past where the market stalls bled into dust, a boy no older than 10 sprinted barefoot through the mud, chasing a rumor. He'd heard it from a cousin, who'd heard it from a truck driver, who swore he saw Ali jogging that morning near the embassy. The boy didn't care if it was true. It was Ali. That was enough. On a cracked concrete wall, someone had painted in bold red, Ali Bomaye. It wasn't graffiti. It was prophecy. It was a spell. The boy stopped to catch his breath. A woman passed him carrying bananas on her head and a sleeping baby on her back. A radio played in the distance, crackling, distant, American. A voice saying something about the biggest fight since Rome. The boy didn't understand the words, but he felt them. Up the road, a group of men sat around a chessboard made of cardboard and bottle caps. One of them wore an Ali t-shirt, faded, too tight across his chest. They argued about the fight the way men argue about war or politics, loud, certain, full of myth. He dances too much, one said. Foreman's too strong, too young. Another shook his head. Ali is Africa. He's already won. Even in the expat cafes, where Belgian diplomats tried to ignore the heat with flat beer and half-broken fans, the talk kept returning to the ring. One journalist, older, sunburned, fingers stained from cheap ink, scribbled notes into a leather-bound journal. His headline was already written. He just didn't know which ending it needed. Meanwhile, in the stadium, the ring stood empty beneath a sky of scaffolding and cables. The ropes were too tight, the mat too soft. But none of that mattered. The ring was sacred space. It didn't belong to the organizers or the sponsors. It belonged to the narrative that would happen inside it. And the story had 2 authors. Muhammad Ali was out walking again. No entourage, no bodyguards. Just him, in sandals and a white tunic, moving through the city like he belonged to it. People didn't mob him. They accompanied him. They flowed around him. He slapped hands. He smiled. He whispered jokes in languages he didn't speak. To them, he wasn't a boxer. He was something more, a rebel, a return, a rhythm made flesh. A little girl, too young to understand anything but presence, reached out and touched his arm as he passed. He turned, bent down, and kissed the top of her head, then kept walking. Ali Bomaye, she said, unsure of what it meant, but loving how it felt in her mouth. Behind him, a military truck rumbled past. Mobutu's men, all in olive green, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. But even they couldn't look away. One of them smiled before remembering not to. Ali kept walking. He passed a stall where a man sold bootleg t-shirts and dried fish. Another where someone sold cassette tapes, James Brown, Miriam Makeba, Fela Kuti. The sound spilled out into the street, mixing with the smell of charcoal and fried maize. 1,000 tiny stories collided around him, and he moved through them like a ghost who'd come home. Back at the hotel, Foreman was watching the news. He didn't understand Lingala, but he understood Ali's face. It was on the screen again. Laughing, waving, talking, always talking. He switched the TV off. He didn't need more noise. He needed silence. Ali was noise. Ali was the drums, the chants, the chaos. Foreman was something else, controlled, focused, deadly. Or at least, he had been. He looked down at his hands. Thick, brutal things. Knuckles that had ended careers. But his mind had started to drift. And that, he knew, was dangerous. The city outside was choosing its hero. And it wasn't him. But the ring. The ring didn't chant. The ring didn't cheer. The ring didn't care who you were, or what you'd lost, or what you'd meant to people who shouted your name like a prayer. The ring only cared about what you did when the bell rang. And Foreman, he was still the hardest puncher alive. At least, that's what he told himself. They were built from different elements. One was thunder, low and gathering. The other was lightning, sharp and unpredictable. They were two forces moving toward each other, not by choice, but by gravity. George Foreman didn't smile much. Not in Zaire, not even before. His walk was slow, heavy, deliberate, like a man dragging something no one else could see. When he trained, there was no music, no shouts, just fists and breath and leather-pounding canvas, over and over again. Boom, boom, boom. Ali danced, even when he wasn't supposed to. He moved like the floor belonged to him, like the air stepped aside to let him pass. He sang when he shadowboxed, he joked mid-combo, he grinned while ducking punches. And still, somehow, he hit you when you weren't ready. Foreman didn't have jokes, he had fists. Each one was a promise, unspoken and brutal. He'd knocked out Joe Frazier in 2 rounds, Kenny Norton in 2. No one had lasted more than 4. He didn't outthink opponents, he erased them. Ali had fought both and lost to both, but he didn't fear Foreman. At least, he said he didn't. He called him the mummy, said he moved like a fridge, said he had no footwork, no rhythm, no soul. But deep down, he knew. This wasn't bluffing at a press conference. This was power, raw, young, hungry power, and it was coming for him. At the hotel gym, Foreman hit the bag like it owed him something. Each blow made the walls flinch. Reporters peeked in, scribbled notes, backed out again. There was no charm there, no circus, just punishment. And yet, there was something distant in his eyes. A kind of fog, like a man doing the work, but not feeling the fire. Ali, on the other hand, was all fire. He fed off people, off noise, off doubt. The more they called him old, the louder he laughed. The more they said he'd die in the ring, the brighter he glowed. They said he was past his prime. He said, "This is my prime." And then he'd wink. In the press tent, Ali held court like a preacher. Microphones in his face, flashbulbs in his eyes. He made them laugh, made them sweat, made them forget that he was about to fight a man who could knock down brick walls. He may be younger, he may be stronger, but he ain't prettier, and he ain't smarter. And you watch, I'm gonna shock the world. Again. Foreman said little. When asked about Ali, he just nodded. He's a great man, he'd say. A great talker. Then he'd put on his headphones and disappear into silence. There were no chants for Foreman, no murals, no chants, no little kids chasing his Jeep. To the people of Zaire, he was a mystery. Tall, dark, quiet, powerful, and somehow foreign. Ali was not quiet. Ali was them. That truth hung in the air like smoke. Even Mobutu noticed it. He had brought the fight to showcase African strength. And yet, it was the American who called himself African that stirred the hearts. One night, a French journalist asked Foreman what he feared most. He paused. Not long, just enough. Then said, "Nothing." But it wasn't true. Not because he feared Ali's punches, because he feared Ali's belief. That belief, the absolute certainty that destiny bent in his direction, was louder than any left hook. Ali didn't just think he would win. He knew. And that kind of knowing made men dangerous. So they trained. Separately. Ali with his rhythm, Foreman with his thunder. They didn't speak to each other, didn't meet eyes, but they both felt the orbit tightening, the clock ticking. And in that space between rounds that hadn't started yet, the world held its breath. They trained like opposites. Foreman pounded the heavy bag until his knuckles split. Ali shadowboxed in the morning sun, dancing like he was warming up for a wedding. One moved like a storm. The other moved like a song. In the compound where Foreman trained, sparring partners came and went quickly. Most couldn't last more than 2 rounds without getting hurt. One of them, a big man from Ghana, lasted 3. When he left, he said only one thing to the press. That man's hands, they don't punch, they crash. Foreman didn't smile at that. He rarely did. He didn't want stories. He wanted silence. He hit, he trained, he iced his swollen knuckles. Then he sat alone. Ali, meanwhile, created theater. One afternoon, he stood outside his hotel room door for 15 minutes, shouting through a megaphone. George Foreman is a mummy. He punches slow. He don't even know he lost yet. Mobutu's guards looked confused. Angelo Dundee just laughed and kept reading the paper. Ali thrived on eyes, on ears, on people. He once stepped into a local barber shop and let a teenager give him a haircut with trembling hands. Cut it sharp, Ali said. I gotta look good when I knock that big man out. The kid didn't charge him. Ali tipped him with a gold watch. Everywhere he went, he gave. Words, smiles, moments. Foreman gave only presence. And presence to him was enough. Until it wasn't. There was one night, just after 2 a.m., when George sat on the balcony of his hotel room. The city below was restless, dogs barking, radios humming, 1,000 windows lit like soft stars. He lit a cigarette, though he didn't smoke, just held it, watched it burn. Inside, his team was asleep. Trainers, handlers, old voices from Houston. He thought about Joe Frazier, how he'd dropped him like a tree falling in the forest. No resistance, just down. He'd expected Ali to be the same. Easy, predictable. Done. But nothing about this fight felt easy. He'd tried to connect. Days earlier, he passed Ali in the hallway. No cameras, no crowd. Just 2 men walking past one another. Ali stopped, grinned, leaned in. You nervous, champ? Foreman blinked. You should be. Ali patted his shoulder and whispered, I'm never nervous. I'm chosen. And then he walked on. Foreman didn't answer, couldn't. There was something in Ali's voice. Not loud, not joking, just true. It haunted him. At a press event the next day, a reporter from South Africa asked Ali how he could possibly beat a man like Foreman. Ali paused, looked the man straight in the eyes. Because I already did, he said. Right here. And he tapped his temple. Foreman's team mocked that quote later. But George didn't laugh. In Zaire, people didn't talk about the fight like a sport. They talked about it like a story they already knew the ending to. A story where one man was a messenger, and the other, just muscle. Ali walked through crowds like a prophet. He shook hands like he was blessing them. He made the people feel like his victory would be theirs. Foreman, for all his strength, never cracked that code. And in the final week before the fight, the city made its choice. Not officially, not publicly, but in whispers, in chants, in the way children stared when Ali passed and barely looked when Foreman did. Ali was myth. Foreman was man. And the moment that truth settled into the soil of Kinshasa, something shifted. Foreman hit the bag just as hard. Ali kept talking, but now the story had a direction. Two fighters, two symbols, and a ring waiting to decide which was real. The letter came on a Tuesday. Typed, cold, unapologetic. You are hereby stripped of your title and your boxing license is suspended indefinitely. Ali read it once, then again. He didn't blink. The room around him was quiet. Too quiet for a man who just lost everything. His championship, his right to fight, his livelihood. All for 3 words: I ain't going. No to Vietnam, no to killing strangers in rice fields. No to war dressed up as duty. They asked him again, in front of 100 microphones. Why won't you serve your country? He didn't flinch. I got no quarrel with them, Viet Cong, he said. Ain't none of them ever called me nigger. That line would echo louder than any punch he ever threw, and America heard it. But they didn't cheer. They turned on him. The same men who had once called him the greatest now called him coward, traitor, disgrace. Television hosts tore him apart. Politicians spat his name. Even other black athletes, quiet ones, safe ones, backed away, scared of being burned by his flame. His passport was seized. His title was gone. Promoters vanished. Sponsors, too. Overnight, Muhammad Ali went from world champion to national pariah. He was 25 years old. He still trained, every morning, in basements, empty gyms, backyards. No fights to prepare for, no purse waiting, no promise of return. But still, he ran, sweated, shadowboxed against a future he wasn't sure would ever show up. Sometimes people came to watch. Not many, but enough. A boy once asked him, "Why you still train if you can't fight no more?" Ali smiled. Because they can take the ring, but they can't take me. That boy never forgot that answer. Years passed, 3, then 4. Ali watched other men fight for his title. Watched men like Frazier rise, then claim what once was his. He watched from the sidelines, face tight, voice sharp when the cameras showed up, but never bitter, because bitter was weak, and Ali wasn't weak. He spoke at colleges, at rallies, on late-night shows that dared book him. He talked about war, about race, about America's double standard, how he could be good enough to wear their flag in Rome, but not good enough to question it at home. He never raised his voice. But somehow, the world still leaned in. There were nights, though. Nights when the money ran low, when the headlines faded, when the doubt crept in. He'd lie on the floor, eyes open, listening to the ceiling fan whisper what-ifs. What if they never let me back? What if I fought my last fight at 25? What if I gave up everything for nothing? But then, morning came, and with it, the ritual. Wake, run, stretch, move, believe. He kept himself in shape like he was guarding something sacred. Because in his mind, he wasn't waiting. He was preparing. In 1970, the phone rang. It wasn't the government. It was Atlanta. A local promoter, a loophole, a license. You ready, champ? Ali didn't hesitate. I was born ready. His return wasn't just a comeback. It was a resurrection. Thousands poured into the arena. More watched from home. Black and white, north and south. Everyone knew it was more than a boxing match. It was a reckoning. He won. Of course he did. But the win wasn't the story. The story was that he was still here. Still fast, still sharp, still Ali. And the world took notice. The exile had not broken him. It had refined him. He wasn't the same man who'd shouted poems and called himself pretty. Now there was steel behind the grin. weight behind the words. Still a prophet, but now a tested one. They had tried to silence him. He made himself louder. They tried to erase him. He became legend. And all of it, the loss, the years, the waiting, came with him to Zaire. Because a man who's been banned from America learns something. He learns that greatness isn't given. It's claimed. The crowd in Madison Square Garden was louder than memory. It didn't roar. It rolled, like thunder circling above a city not yet hit by rain. Ali stood in the tunnel, wrapped in white, eyes steady. His return had already begun in Atlanta, but this was different. This was New York. This was Frazier. Two undefeated men, one title, one night to settle everything. But Ali carried more than gloves into that ring. He carried years. He carried exile. He carried the weight of a country that still didn't know whether to cheer or to curse his name. And he lost. Frazier's left hook came like a sledgehammer in the 15th. Ali dropped, hard, got up, finished the fight. But the decision was clear. Joe Frazier won. Ali walked out to silence. Not because they hated him, because they were stunned. The prophet had bled. For a moment, it looked like the exile had left cracks. But Ali never stayed broken. He came back swinging. Not just in the ring, but in spirit. He fought again, and again. He beat Quarry, Ellis, Norton, then lost to Norton, then beat him again. Each bout was a battle, not just with the opponent, but with time, pain, and the myth he was still chasing. He wasn't the fastest anymore. His legs didn't float like they used to, but his mind, sharper than ever. He began to adapt, less dancing, more thinking, less taunting, more traps. He let them come in, let them throw, let them believe. Then he struck. He learned to fight tired, to win ugly, to turn exhaustion into a weapon. Outside the ring, his voice only grew louder. Colleges lined up for him. Black students called him king. White ones called him complicated. The press didn't know what to make of him. One moment he joked and rhymed and smiled. The next he thundered about oppression, war, police, prisons. But no matter where he went, he moved people. In Chicago, a child asked him, "Why you still box if you already a legend?" He looked down, smiled. "Because legends still gotta eat." The crowd laughed, but the truth in that answer lingered. He was tired. He hit it well. But the years away, the money lost, the court battles, they all left marks. Ali had gone from being the man no one could hit to the man who wouldn't fall. And that, in itself, became legend. By 1974, he had fought 10 times since his return. He had rebuilt his name, reclaimed some glory. But the belt? The real belt? It still belonged to George Foreman, the monster, the destroyer, the man who did to Frazier what Ali could not. That truth gnawed at him, because deep down, Ali knew he was not done. Not until he stood face to face with the new king. Not until he looked that power in the eyes and took back everything they'd taken from him. And then, Zaire. The offer came wrapped in confusion. Mobutu. Africa. A fight at 4 a.m. for American TV. The press called it insane, dangerous, a stunt. Ali called it fate. He smiled when they told him the ring would be in Kinshasa. He didn't ask about money or conditions. He just asked, "Where's Foreman?" That's all he needed. Because for Ali, this wasn't just a title shot. It was the end of exile, the closing of a circle, from Louisville to Rome, from Vietnam to Madison Square, from pariah to prophet. Now finally, a ring where he could be both. He was born into heat. Not the soft warmth of southern summer, but the choking kind. The kind that sticks to your skin like punishment. Houston, Texas, 1949. No air conditioning. No father. No plan. George grew up in the Fifth Ward, where kids either disappeared or got hard. Fast. He didn't talk much. Didn't smile. He learned early that words didn't feed you. Fists might. At school, he was the tall one, the angry one, the kid who always looked like he might flip a desk. Teachers didn't know what to do with him, so they didn't. He learned more on the street than in any classroom. How to watch a man's shoulders, not his mouth. How to disappear before sirens came. How to take a punch and not blink. And how to throw one back twice as hard. By 15, he'd stopped pretending. Dropped out, ran with rougher crowds, stole things, fought for fun, fought for survival, fought because it was the only thing that ever made sense. One night he stole a jacket. Not for money, just because he was cold. He almost got caught, hid in a dumpster for 3 hours. When he climbed out, something shifted. He wasn't scared, he was ashamed. And for George Foreman, shame was gasoline. He enrolled in Job Course. Some counselor told him, "You're strong, you should try boxing." He laughed. Boxing's for punks. But something about the idea stuck. First time he hit a heavy bag, the room stopped. His fists didn't land. They landed, like thunderclaps. Even the trainer flinched. From that day forward, he had a path, and he followed it like a soldier. No parties, no drugs, no distractions, just pain, discipline, and a growing storm inside his chest. He didn't want to be champion. He wanted to crush champions. At the Olympics in Mexico City, 1968, Foreman won gold. He raised a tiny American flag after the victory. Quiet, controlled, not smiling. The press called him a mystery, a silent killer. They weren't wrong, but what they didn't see, what no one saw, was the furnace behind his stillness. He wasn't boxing to win. He was boxing to destroy. Every punch was a release, every knockout a purge. By the early 70s, no one wanted to face him. He wasn't slick, he wasn't graceful, but he was inevitable. Men broke their hands trying to stop him. Trainers begged their fighters not to stand too long. Joe Frazier was undefeated. Foreman dropped him 6 times in 2 rounds. Kenny Norton was built like stone. Foreman cracked him like glass. His stare was enough to unnerve grown men. Cold, unmoving, like a statue that might punch. He said little, did less. But when he moved, it was with biblical force. He didn't dance. He advanced. But all that silence hid something. George wasn't happy. He didn't enjoy interviews, didn't trust crowds, didn't care for fans. He lived in a house too big for conversation, slept in rooms too quiet to dream. At night, he'd sit with the TV off. Just the hum of the fridge and the weight of being king. Because being feared isn't the same as being loved. And George had never felt the second. He had money now, belts, headlines. But still, when he looked in the mirror, he saw the kid from Fifth Ward. Still cold, still alone, still swinging. In Kinshasa, the people didn't cheer for him. They watched, from behind trees, from balconies, from the edges of alleys. But their eyes weren't warm. They whispered his name like a question. Because he didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't speak Lingala, didn't try. To them, he was a shadow, big, powerful, but not theirs. Ali was theirs, and George felt that. He never said it out loud, but every time he walked past a mural of Ali's face, painted in fire orange and gold, something inside him dimmed. Because this fight, This war in the jungle wasn't just about belts. It was about belonging. And George Foreman had never belonged anywhere. It started with a cut, just above the right eye, small but deep. Sparring partner caught him with a headbutt. Unintentional, clumsy. But it bled, and bled. Foreman stepped back from the ring. Silent. The gym fell quiet. No one said a word. Only the trainer, Dick Sadler, moved, walking over slow, pressing a towel to the skin. "George," he said, "we gotta pull you out for a few days." Foreman didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, eyes heavy. The cut wasn't the problem. It was the break. Because George Foreman wasn't built for stillness. In Kinshasa, the sun rose too early, too strong, and without training to burn the nerves, Foreman started to boil. He stayed in his compound, behind guards, behind silence. No fans, no reporters, no noise. Just sweat and waiting. Ali, meanwhile, danced through markets. He greeted children, laughed with elders, shouted through megaphones. And every time Foreman turned on the TV, there he was. "Ali Bomaye," they chanted. "Kill him, Ali." Foreman turned it off. He tried to focus, shadowboxed in the mirror, ran in small circles in the courtyard. But it wasn't the same. He needed the bag. He needed impact. He needed to break something. And yet every time he threw a punch in the air, his mind whispered, "Don't reopen the cut. Don't lose the fight before it starts." That whisper became a roar. At night, he barely slept. The cicadas outside his window screamed like ghosts. The bed was too soft, the sheets too clean. He missed the cheap motel rooms back in Texas, missed the grime, missed the grind. Mobutu had given him a palace, but it felt like a prison. He wandered the halls in silence, looked out over a city that didn't look back. One night he asked his trainer, "Why do they love him?" Sadler didn't answer at first, just lit a cigarette. Then, finally, because he gives them something to believe in. George stared. "And I don't?" Sadler exhaled. "You give them something to fear." It hit him harder than any jab, because he knew it was true. Ali was myth. George was muscle. Ali promised. George punished. And now, in Zaire, punishment didn't sell. Not to people who'd already had too much of it. Foreman's team tried to protect him. They scheduled a private workout just for the cameras. No heavy sparring. Just movement, mitts, poses. He went through the motions. Jab, cross, breathe. But even the press could see it. He looked tight, flat, not slow, but constrained. One reporter whispered to another, "He's thinking too much." And when George left the gym that day, he heard the chant again. Ali Bomaye. This time, louder. In the final days before the fight, Foreman sat with a bottle of cold water pressed to his cut. The swelling had gone down. The bleeding had stopped. But the itch under the bandage was unbearable. He looked in the mirror. Not at his body, still carved like granite. Not at his hands, still sledgehammers. But at his eyes. And for the first time in years, he saw fear. Not of Ali, not of losing, but of being seen. Because deep down, George Foreman wasn't afraid to fall. He was afraid the world might understand him. Understand the boy from Houston who hit because he didn't know how to ask. The man who became a champion not to be loved, but to never be ignored again. The day before the fight, he finally left the compound. No cameras, no parade. Just him, a cap, and a pair of sunglasses. He walked through the edges of Kinshasa, past vendors, past barbers, past kids playing with deflated soccer balls. Some stared, most didn't. Then, from the shade of a crumbling doorway, An old man called out, "You strong, but not ready." Foreman stopped, looked at him. The man smiled, gap-toothed, holding nothing but a cane and a mango. "Power is good," he said, "but the jungle listens to rhythm." Foreman didn't reply, just nodded, and walked on. But those words, they stuck. In the jungle, power wasn't enough. You needed rhythm. You needed grace. You needed the people. And Foreman, undefeated, unshaken, unstoppable, was beginning to realize he might have brought the storm to Zaire. But Ali was the rain. He ruled with sunglasses and silence. Mobutu Sese Seko, President of Zaire, king without crown, leopard-hatted father of a frightened nation. In Kinshasa, his face was everywhere. On coins, on flags, on walls peeling from heat and time. His smile, rare and rehearsed, told the people what to feel. But no one believed the smile. Not really. They feared the other side of it. Mobutu didn't care about boxing. Not at first. He cared about power, perception, projection. And when the chance came to bring the most famous black man in the world to Zaire, twice, if you counted Foreman, he didn't hesitate. $10 million for a fight? Pocket change. Because this wasn't just a sporting event, it was a mirror. And Mobutu planned to show the world exactly what he wanted them to see. He ordered the city cleaned. Trash disappeared. So did beggars. Military trucks rolled through alleys at night, scraping poverty into the dark. New posters went up. Not of Mobutu this time, but of Ali, of Foreman, of strength. He turned Kinshasa into a stage, and in the center of that stage, a ring. One ring. One night. One myth to be crafted under floodlights. But behind the choreography, Zaire held its breath. Mobutu's police watched everyone. Journalists were escorted. Locals were silenced. Foreigners kept smiling. Because in Zaire, nothing happened without permission, and no one wanted to test the limits of hospitality. Ali understood it. Instantly. He moved through Kinshasa like a politician, shook hands, kissed babies, shouted slogans in Lingala. Ali Bomaye wasn't his invention, but he amplified it. Because Ali didn't just want to win the fight. He wanted to win the crowd, the country, the story. He saw the cameras Mobutu placed around the stadium. He saw the red carpets, the uniformed soldiers, the broadcasters flown in from Paris, London, New York. He knew the difference between a fight and a performance. And Zaire was theater. Foreman didn't get it. He stayed in his villa, didn't mix, didn't smile, didn't ask questions. Mobutu's people found him cold, suspicious, too American. He arrived with a German shepherd. To many in Kinshasa, it was a bad sign. Colonial echoes, police dogs, memory of violence. Ali used it, joked on radio. George brings a dog. I bring love. The people laughed. They didn't forget. Mobutu didn't care who won, but he did care how it looked. He wanted unity, prestige, power. And Ali gave him spectacle, language, rhythm. Foreman gave him silence, distance, danger. Mobutu preferred applause. The night before the fight, Mobutu held a private dinner. His generals sat around him, broad shoulders, stone faces. No one chewed too loud. He asked one of his advisors, "Do they know this is history?" The man nodded. Ali knows. Mobutu lit a cigar. And the other? The advisor hesitated. Then softly, "The other is hoping strength is enough." Mobutu chuckled. The sound was not warm. Around Kinshasa, drums echoed. Not war drums, celebration drums. Vendors sold Ali Bomai shirts in every corner. Taxi drivers blasted his voice from old cassettes. It wasn't just that Ali was charming. It was that he felt like something else, something rare. Foreman felt like a warning. Ali felt like a song. And Mobutu, master of appearances, knew what made good television. Still, behind the curtain, tension buzzed. Mobutu's regime was brutal. His prisons were full. His enemies were gone, or buried. The fight was not just a distraction. It was insurance. Because as long as the world watched the ring, they didn't watch the cage around it. And Ali, knowingly or not, played his role to perfection. When the final press conference came, Mobutu didn't speak. He sat in a high-backed chair, silent, imposing. Let the fighters talk. Ali stole the room. Jokes, poems, prophecy. Foreman sat still, arms folded, eyes distant. The cameras loved one, tolerated the other. Mobutu watched both and smiled, because his game had already been won. It rained, not much, just a whisper against the banana leaves. Enough to cool the dust, but not the tension. Kinshasa had held its breath for too long. Now, the night before the fight, the city exhaled in silence. Ali stood on the balcony of his suite, shirtless, barefoot, wrapped in a towel. The hotel lights flickered behind him, yellow and tired. Below, drums echoed faintly. Not from the stadium, from the people. The ones who didn't need tickets to feel the moment. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he thought. It all becomes real again. Inside, Bundini paced the floor, muttering lines of poetry to himself, eyes wild. You the man, champ. The whole damn continent knows it. Ali didn't respond. He was watching the sky. It had no stars tonight, just clouds and weight. Across town, Foreman sat alone in his room, legs spread wide, staring at the floor. The television was off. The room was quiet. He didn't want advice, didn't want visitors, didn't want questions, just the sound of his own breath. The cut had closed, but the doubt hadn't. He had replayed it 1,000 times. What round to press, when to unload, how to trap the ropes. But still something felt loose, like a door slightly open, like the story wasn't finished yet. Ali lay down on the cool tile floor. Not the bed. Too soft. He wanted to feel the ground beneath him. He whispered something only he could hear. Not a prayer, not a plan, just rhythm. His body moved with it, shoulders twitching, breath sinking with the imagined beat. He wasn't preparing to fight. He was preparing to perform. Later, he wandered the hallway. He passed Drew Bundini asleep on a couch, snoring softly. Past a security guard nodding off in a plastic chair. Ali walked barefoot, slowly, like he didn't want the night to end. He turned a corner and ran into a mirror. Stopped. Looked at himself. Not the public man. Not the voice or the fists. Just him. He touched the glass, stared into his own eyes. And for a second, he didn't see a god or a myth. He saw a man who was afraid, not of losing, of becoming forgotten. Foreman opened a drawer and pulled out a Bible. His fingers touched the pages but didn't turn them. He had read it so many times before fights. But tonight it felt heavier, like it might ask him something he couldn't give. He closed it gently and whispered, I'm not the villain. I'm just me. Meanwhile, the city hummed. Night vendors lit lanterns in back alleys. Children chased each other through puddles, shouting Ali's name like a spell. And in the shadows, soldiers smoked quietly, watching everything. Mobutu didn't sleep that night. He sat in his chair, surrounded by silence and suits. He listened to a report from the stadium crew. He checked the power generators. He asked about the satellite broadcast. Not a word about the fight itself, because for him, tomorrow wasn't about fists. It was about image. Ali returned to his room. Didn't speak, didn't smile, just lay back on the floor again. He remembered the heat of Miami, the hunger of '64, the exile, the silence, the roar of crowds returning. He remembered everything, because tomorrow, the world would remember him. Or not. Foreman finally stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dark. Somewhere out there, Ali was doing the same. They weren't enemies. They weren't friends. They were mirrors. And tomorrow, one of them would crack. They came before sunrise, thousands of them, moving like water. Children on shoulders, drums on backs, faces painted in white, red, green. Kinshasa wasn't sleeping. It was pulsing. Because this wasn't just a fight. It was a celebration, a prophecy, a release. And in the center of it all was Ali. He stood on a balcony above the stadium gates. Not regal, not loud, just present. His robe shimmered gold in the morning light, like it already knew something no one else did. He raised one hand. The crowd roared back, louder than the drums. Ali Bomaye! Not just a chant, a war cry, a love song. Kill him, Ali. Beat him, break the beast. But it didn't sound angry. It sounded like music. Somewhere nearby, James Brown checked his mic. He was sweating before the first note. "This ain't no opening act," he whispered. "This is the revolution." The stage lights flickered on. Horns blared. Percussion cracked the air open. And the godfather of soul exploded into "Get up off of that thing," like the continent had been waiting years just to dance again. Mobutu watched from his private box. Stone-faced, perfectly still. But even he couldn't stop his foot from tapping. Not even dictators are immune to funk. Behind him, cameras rolled. Networks in 5 languages. Commentators sweating in suits. Outside, the sun climbed over Kinshasa like a spotlight. Ali was dancing now, not fighting, dancing, with kids, with strangers, with a joy that felt impossible hours before a war. Foreman wasn't there. He stayed away from the crowd, the noise, the rhythm, the heat. He sat in the shade of a mango tree outside his compound, alone, a towel over his head, sweat on his back, silence in his bones. He heard the music, but he didn't move, didn't smile. Because for Foreman, this wasn't joy, it was pressure. A continent on one man's side, and that man wasn't him. Ali walked through the market at noon. Vendors offered him fruit, clothes, carved masks. He bought everything, gave it all away. He kissed babies, blessed marriages, told jokes that didn't need translation. He became Zaire for a day, not a visitor, not even a guest. He was rhythm. He was myth. That night, another concert lit up the city. Miriam Makeba sang Freedom in 3 tongues. B.B. King played a blues that made grown men weep in the dark. And still the drums never stopped. You could hear them under everything, like the heartbeat of a continent. Ali sat backstage, legs crossed, sipping mint tea. He wasn't thinking about Foreman. He was thinking about music. "How can you lose," he said, "when you got all this behind you?" Bundini laughed, slapped his shoulder. "Champ, you ain't just got the crowd, you got the spirit." Ali nodded slowly. Not in arrogance, in faith. Foreman shadowboxed in silence. His coach tried to break through. "George, listen." But Foreman just waved him off. He wasn't angry. He was out of tune, like a note that couldn't find its place in the melody. Later at the hotel, Ali turned to his team. "Tomorrow," he said, "I shock the world again." Silence followed. Not disbelief, just awe. Because somehow everyone believed him, even the ones who shouldn't. Kinshasa didn't sleep. Not really. It danced, it beat, it hoped. And somewhere in the noise, between sweat and prayer and soul, the fight became something else. Not violence, not sport. A story waiting to be told. They came early, not for the seats, not for the show, but for the feeling. It started with footsteps on dry soil, then sandals, then drums, then song. By noon, the crowd around Stade du 20 Mai pulsed like a heartbeat. Not waiting, not hoping, burning. Ali arrived through a side gate, but it didn't matter. They knew. The sound shifted when he entered, like thunder flipping sides. Ali Bomaye! It wasn't just noise anymore. It was identity, a shared belief, a cry that reached past sport and into the soul. People didn't just chant for Ali. They breathed him. Women wept. Children climbed fences just to see his shadow. Vendors sold T-shirts with his face, most of them handmade that morning. Some misspelled his name. Didn't matter. They got the spirit right. Foreman arrived in silence. His team shielded him with towels, security, sunglasses. But even from inside the van, he could feel it. The air had a weight now. It didn't move with him. It resisted. No chants, no smiles, just eyes. Some curious, some cold, most unmoved. Ali stood by the ropes during sound check. He didn't look nervous. He looked home. He played to the crowd like he was warming up a choir. Raised a fist. They mirrored it. Spoke a line. They echoed it. He pointed toward Foreman's locker room and winked. The people exploded. Ali Bomaye! He laughed, not mockingly, with joy. Because this wasn't about ego anymore. This was communion. Up in the stands, a young boy held a paper sign. It just said, "Do it for all of us." A woman nearby carried a baby in one arm and an old photo of Malcolm X in the other. Ali saw her, nodded. He didn't know her name, but he knew what she meant. Foreman laced his gloves in silence. No music, no talking. He had trained in silence his whole life, but this silence felt different. It wasn't quiet. It was heavy. One of his cornermen whispered, "George, we still win this. Doesn't matter what they yell." But Foreman didn't answer, because somewhere, deep down, he knew. This was no longer a neutral ring. This was Ali's temple, and the crowd wasn't watching. It was judging. The sun lowered, casting long shadows across the bleachers. A breeze cut through the heat like a blade. Ali stepped out into the center of the ring for one last photo. The camera flashed, and in that instant, it looked like he was made of gold and flame. Not a fighter, a myth. Mobutu watched from above. No smile, no applause, but his eyes held approval. This was bigger than Zaire now. It was Africa on camera, dancing, roaring, rising. And Ali. Ali was the spark. Later that evening, as the final tests were run, a technician leaned against a concrete wall, sweat running down his back. He turned to his friend and said, "You feel that?" The friend nodded. "That's not nerves," he said. "That's history." He smiled, but the smile had a purpose. Everything did. Ali was never chaos. He was design in disguise. They called him a clown, a poet, a loudmouth. But they missed the map. Because long before Kinshasa, long before the cameras and the chants, Ali had started drawing a plan. A slow, patient, punishing plan. He knew Foreman was stronger, younger, meaner. He'd seen the tapes. Foreman destroying Frazier in 2 rounds, breaking Norton like a toy. And Ali had fought those men too. He felt what Foreman did to them. This wasn't a fairy tale, it was physics, and physics said Ali would fall. But Ali believed in rhythm more than force. In the weeks before the fight, he trained less like a boxer, more like a monk. Breathing, timing, endurance. "Let him swing," he told Angelo. "I'll let the big man punch until the gas runs out." Angelo winced. "He hits like a truck." Ali grinned. "Then I'll be the road." They tested it in sparring. Ali leaned back, guard high, took hit after hit on the arms, ribs, gloves. Not one counter, just survive. Let the storm pass. It looked wrong, but Ali wasn't building a defense. He was building faith. He called it rope-a-dope, a joke at first. But the more he said it, the more it became real. Like a spell. You throw, I rest. You throw, I rest. Then, pop, good night. Bundini didn't like it. He loved the talk, the fire, the magic, not the waiting, not the quiet. But Ali knew. The only way to beat Foreman was to disappear. Hide in plain sight. That's why he smiled. That's why he danced in the streets. It wasn't just charm. It was distraction. Let Foreman see a fool. Let the world see a show. But in the quiet hours, Ali traced the outlines of the ring in his mind. He could feel the ropes against his back before ever touching them. He could hear Foreman's breathing getting heavier, second by second, as the rounds piled up. The night before, in the dark of the hotel room, Ali lay on the floor and whispered the rounds. 4, 5, 6. Slow it down. Let him chase. Let the anger burn hot. He knew Foreman would come for blood. Ali would give him boredom instead. His body ached from weeks of impact. His ribs were sore. His arms bruised from absorbing punches. No one else saw it, but Ali felt it. He was carrying pain, like a secret, but also a promise. In the locker room on fight day, he stayed quiet, wrapped his own hands with slow, practiced focus, looked at his reflection, not to admire, but to remember. This was not the Ali of 1964. That man was gone. This Ali had lost, been banned, humiliated, but also reborn. He sat with his eyes closed, saw not just the crowd, not just the ring, but Foreman's rage, and how rage always burned brightest just before it broke. Someone knocked on the door. 10 minutes. Ali stood, rolled his neck, pulled on the robe. White with gold trim, not just clothing, armor. He turned to his team. Let's go make history. He couldn't sleep. Not that night. Not before the lights. Foreman lay flat on his back, eyes open, ceiling still. The fan above him spun slow, like time had thickened. His fists felt too tight, his chest too shallow, and he hated it. Because this wasn't fear, it was something worse. It was doubt. He'd never felt it before. Not like this. He had trained to erase feeling, punch it out, sweat it out, silence it. But now, alone in Zaire, the silence spoke louder than he ever wanted. He sat up, walked to the mirror. The face staring back wasn't scared, but it wasn't ready either. It looked tired, not weak, but human. And George Foreman was not supposed to be human. Downstairs, his trainer waited. They ate in silence. Eggs, toast, juice, no flavor. Foreman barely touched his food. He kept looking at the walls, at the shadows that moved when no one did. Outside, the streets were already humming. Not for him, for Ali. Always Ali. The city wasn't neutral anymore, if it ever was. A car ride through Kinshasa that morning proved it. Crowds ignored his motorcade. No chants, no claps, just stares. One boy threw a stone. It missed, but the message didn't. Foreman closed his eyes, tried to focus on breath, on fists, on force, but it didn't land. Everything felt slippery, as if the ground itself was shifting beneath him. They took him to the stadium early, let him warm up in silence. The ring was still being polished. Cables coiled, lights tested, chairs arranged. Foreman stepped inside, alone, walked the ropes, bounced once. Something didn't feel right. The canvas was soft, too soft. Or maybe it was just his legs. Allie wasn't there yet, but Foreman felt him. Everywhere. In the posters, in the crowd outside, in the air, like electricity waiting to snap. He tried to stretch, loosen up, threw a few jabs at the heavy bag, but even the bag seemed unimpressed. Bundini walked by, just passing through, but he winked. "Hope y'all brought pillows," he laughed. "Ali's gonna dance all night." Foreman looked away. Didn't answer, didn't trust his voice. Later in the locker room, he sat alone for too long. His team stayed quiet. They felt it too. The pressure wasn't coming from the fight. It came from around the fight. A storm that never touched the ground, but shook every tree. Someone turned on the radio. Another James Brown song. Foreman stood, unplugged it, and walked away. He didn't want rhythm anymore. He wanted silence. But silence had stopped being a friend. He wrapped his hands slow, almost ritualistic. But the tape felt wrong, tight in the wrong places. He redid it 3 times. Allie hadn't even entered the building yet, but Foreman already felt behind, already felt like the cameras weren't his, like the spotlight had chosen someone else. His coach came close, whispered, "You still got thunder, George. You still got it." Foreman nodded, but deep down, he wasn't sure thunder was enough. Not here, not now, not when the world was already cheering for the storm. Night fell like velvet, thick, slow, heavy with heat. Kinshasa pulsed, not with sirens or traffic, but with voices. Voices that didn't shout, not yet, but hummed low, rising in waves like smoke from the earth. On the streets, drums whispered. Radios crackled. Children chased one another through narrow alleys, already wearing shirts that read, Ali Bomai. The city wasn't asleep. It was coiled, waiting. The stadium glowed from a distance, like a moon that had landed in the middle of Zaire. A soft orange haze above the trees, over the rooftops, through the dust. As people drew near, the air changed. It thickened. Time seemed to slow. Steps became heavier, breaths more deliberate. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. Inside, 60,000 bodies pressed close. Shirts soaked through, eyes wide. Fans waved palm leaves or rolled newspapers to fan the sweat from their faces. But nobody moved. Nobody wanted to miss what was coming. Beneath the lights, the ring waited. Not large, not loud, but sacred. Reporters held onto their microphones like anchors. Cameramen adjusted lenses with trembling hands. Broadcasts linked Kinshasa to London, New York, Tokyo. Across the world, people leaned forward. But here, it was everything. Behind the scenes, Ali sat quietly, eyes half closed, breathing deep. He wasn't smiling for show anymore. The grin was softer now, private, almost still. Bundini stood beside him, eyes dancing, voice hushed. "They're ready." Ali rose slowly like a curtain being lifted. Foreman sat in another room, hands clenched, arms across his chest. Still. His team stayed back. They knew the silence wasn't peace. It was pressure, dense, invisible. His eyes didn't move, but inside, the war had already begun. The announcer's voice cracked through the heat. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the rumble in the jungle." The crowd erupted, not in noise, but in belief. Ali walked first, white robe, trimmed in gold, white gloves, calm steps. He didn't dance, not yet, but every move had rhythm. The crowd chanted, "Ali Bomai, Ali Bomai." He raised one hand to the sky, just once, like a prophet. Then came Foreman. Dark shorts, brooding face. No expression. No music followed him. Just the weight of expectation. He didn't wave. He didn't acknowledge the crowd. He entered like a storm, silent, heavy, unavoidable. In the ring, the two men approached each other. They stood close, too close. Ali leaned in and whispered something. Foreman didn't answer. The referee gave instructions. The moment lingered. Then they turned away. Each man returned to his corner. Trainers fussed, pulling at robes, checking tape, splashing water across shoulders. The lights seemed brighter now. The noise dimmed. A single beat remained. Then, the bell rang, and the jungle roared. Round one began with movement. Ali danced. Not wildly, not like in his prime, but with purpose. A shuffle, a feint, a jab that kissed the air. Foreman came forward, heavy, relentless, like a wave that didn't care where the shore was. He didn't throw wild punches. He threw intentions, and everyone carried weight. The crowd roared, part chant, part gasp. Ali touched the ropes early, not by accident, not from fear. It was part of the plan, and no one watching understood it. The commentators didn't know what they were seeing. "They said he wouldn't dance," one of them muttered. "He's backing into the ropes already. Is he hurt?" But Ali wasn't hurt. Not yet. He was calculating. He wanted Foreman to chase. He wanted him to waste energy. He wanted the heat, the pace, the pressure to work against him. Ali kept talking. "You can't hit what you can't see, George." He blocked high, turned his shoulders, smiled in the clinch. Foreman responded with silence. And fists. He hammered Ali's sides. Short hooks, thudding blows, not elegant, but brutal. The sound echoed, glove on flesh, bone on muscle. The kind of sound that stays with you in your ribs. But Ali didn't fold. He absorbed. He leaned. He covered. And then, he whispered. Every time Foreman swung, Ali gave him a line. "Is that all you got? Hit harder, champ. You gonna cry when I knock you out?" Foreman grunted, pushed harder. His arms began to shine with sweat. Round two, same rhythm. Ali circled for a moment, then retreated again. The crowd didn't understand. They wanted fireworks. They got friction, more body shots, more clinching. Ali whispered more. Foreman's punches still landed, but they started to slow. Just a fraction. His breathing grew louder, his feet heavier. He wasn't used to missing. He wasn't used to questions. Round three, Foreman rushed, tried to corner Ali, and Ali let him for a second. Then he slipped away, glided across the ring, tossed a jab, another, then leaned into the ropes like he was lounging. Foreman looked frustrated now. He'd landed 30 punches, but Ali looked fresh. And worse, Ali looked amused. In the fourth, Ali changed it, just for a flash. He threw. A real combination. Left jab, right hook, quick shuffle, uppercut. The crowd exploded. Foreman blinked. Then Ali leaned back into the ropes again. Foreman charged. Ali smiled. This wasn't dancing. This was theater, a trap wrapped in showmanship. And yet, it was working. By round 5, the rhythm had shifted. Ali wasn't just surviving. He was directing. Foreman's team began to worry. They didn't say it, but you could see it in their eyes. The way they wiped his shoulders faster. The way they leaned into his ear between rounds. "Don't let him talk to you," one said. But it was too late. Ali was already in. Between rounds, Ali sat tall on the stool. Didn't slump, didn't wheeze. He looked across the ring like he was watching a movie he'd already seen. And Foreman? He sat hunched, arms burning, jaw tight. He was winning on the cards, but he was losing something else, something harder to measure. In round 6, Ali whispered again. Almost time. Foreman threw a wild hook. It missed. Ali didn't counter. He just nodded, like a man counting down. Round 7 didn't start with sound. It started with breath. Foreman was breathing heavier now, not just through his mouth, but through his whole body. His shoulders rose with effort. His chest thudded with fatigue. Ali watched, not just with eyes, with instinct, with rhythm. He stayed by the ropes again, but now his stance was tighter, more compact. He wasn't covering up out of caution. He was loading. The crowd didn't know what they were witnessing. They had watched 6 rounds of pummeling. They had seen Foreman hammer Ali with shots that should have ended fights, should have broken bones, should have dropped anyone else. And yet, Ali was there, still, breathing, watching, and whispering. "Is that it, George?" Foreman didn't answer. His gloves hung a little lower now. His feet dragged a little more. His punches came a second slower. Ali touched him with jabs. Small ones. Quick, annoying, like knocking on a locked door, just to let you know someone's home. Then it shifted. Midway through the round, Ali fired. 1-2, then another, then a hook off the ropes. The sound cracked different this time. Foreman blinked. It wasn't just that Ali had hit him. It was when. The timing, the snap, the echo. Ali wasn't fighting back randomly. He had been studying, waiting. And now, he was opening the door. The commentators still didn't believe it. "Ali can't win trading shots," one muttered. But Ali wasn't trading. He was taking, and giving back only when it mattered, like a man who knew something the rest didn't. Then came the moment. Late in the 7th, Foreman cornered Ali again. He raised both hands, swung a wide hook. Ali ducked, not slowly, not dramatically. He vanished, like breath on glass. Foreman stumbled forward, off balance. Ali stepped off the ropes, planted and launched, a right hand, straight, clean, with everything behind it. Then a left, then another right. Foreman's head snapped, his knees buckled. He tried to swing back, but the ring was already tilting. Ali threw one final punch. A short, sharp hook. Foreman turned in slow motion. Fell forward. Arms outstretched. Legs folding. Face first, into the canvas. The stadium didn't explode right away. There was a second of silence, like the world had blinked. Then, a roar, a tidal wave of disbelief and joy and noise. People screamed, jumped, cried. Ali didn't celebrate, not yet. He stood over Foreman, calm, hands loose, eyes wide, as if even he was stunned by how precise it had been. The referee counted. 6, 7, 8. Foreman rolled onto his back, eyes glassy, arms slow. 9, 10. It was over. Ali raised both arms to the sky, this time not with flair, with truth, with the weight of exile, of silence, of years doubted and mocked and erased. This wasn't just a win. It was return. The roar didn't stop. It rose, swirled, fell back, then rose again, as if the very air in Kinshasa refused to settle. Ali walked slowly, almost floating around the ring. His gloves hung low, his arms swayed, his face glistened, but not with exhaustion. He wasn't out of breath. He was in it, completely. The moment belonged to him. Bundini jumped into the ring first, screamed something to the sky, then wrapped Ali in a bear hug, both of them swaying like kids who had stolen something beautiful. Angelo Dundee followed, hands to his head, disbelief blooming in every wrinkle of his face. Ali didn't yell, didn't pose. He closed his eyes, tilted his head back, as if listening for something only he could hear. Across the ring, Foreman sat on a stool, silent, still breathing heavy. His corner buzzed around him, checking pupils, wiping sweat, speaking softly. But Foreman wasn't listening. He was staring at the canvas, the same canvas he had kissed moments ago, where his strength had cracked, where the myth had broken. Ali climbed the ropes, not fast, not dramatic. He just lifted himself like a man rising from prayer. He looked out, not at the crowd, not at the reporters, but into the dark corners of the stadium. To the rooftops, the balconies, the faces painted in sweat and hope. And then he raised both hands, not as fists, as wings. Mobutu watched from his chair, didn't move, didn't blink. His plan had worked. The cameras had captured what he wanted: black strength, black unity, a spectacle written in fists and floodlight. And Ali had given him more than he asked for. Not just victory, but poetry. In the streets outside, the crowd exploded. People danced, sang, lifted strangers into the air. Old men wept openly. Teenagers beat makeshift drums. Vendors threw their last drinks into the air like offerings. The city of Kinshasa had been holding its breath for weeks. Now, it exhaled. Ali made his way to the mic. Reporters swarmed, flashbulbs popping like firecrackers. He didn't give them statistics. He gave them story. I told you all. I told you I was the greatest, but you wouldn't believe me. He turned to the crowd. You hear me now, Zaire? You believed before the world did. The chant returned, Ali Bomaye. Ali Bomaye. And this time, it wasn't just words. It was truth. Foreman finally stood, walked slowly to Ali. No anger, no shame, just wait. He nodded once. Ali nodded back. They didn't hug, they didn't speak. But in that small, shared silence, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. The press conference was chaos. Reporters from 6 continents packed into a sweltering room with broken fans and too many microphones. Ali walked in like a man arriving at his own funeral and finding it turned into a wedding. He smiled, wide, loose, free. He quoted scripture, laughed, spoke of Africa like home, told stories, sang a little. But underneath it all, there was something calmer, something resolved. That night, Kinshasa didn't sleep. Fireworks popped above the river. Motorbikes raced through alleys. Every radio, every bar, every rooftop told the same story. Ali didn't just beat Foreman. He became something else. The ring was empty now. The ropes still swayed. The sweat still clung to the floor. The floodlights still hummed overhead, as if unsure the show was truly over. But Ali was gone. Foreman was gone. Only echoes remained. And in those echoes, the world began to speak. Headlines bloomed across continents. Ali shocks the world. The rumble in the jungle. Legend reborn. Foreman falls in Zaire. In Harlem, men in barber chairs replayed every round from memory, each punch exaggerated, every moment retold in rhythm and pride. In London, night owls stayed glued to radios long after the broadcast ended, whispering to no one in particular, "He did it. My God, he actually did it." In Lagos, in Detroit, in Cairo, in Kingston, everywhere blackness lived and struggled and searched for symbols, Ali's name rang like a bell that refused to stop. But not everyone was thrilled. Some pundits still called him a showman, a manipulator. Others said the win was luck, that Foreman was unwell, overtrained, unfocused. Ali didn't care. He knew what had happened. And more importantly, he knew what it meant. Foreman disappeared. No press tour, no apologies, no explanations. He boarded a plane out of Zaire and flew into silence. The man who had knocked out everybody had finally been knocked out himself, and not by a punch, but by something harder to name. Strategy, psychology, faith, call it what you want. It humbled him. For a time, it buried him. Ali, on the other hand, soared. Talk shows, photo shoots, global interviews. Presidents shook his hand. Children ran to him in the street. Artists painted him. Poets praised him. But he didn't grow louder. Strangely, he grew quieter. He smiled more, nodded more. Let the world come to him. Because now, he wasn't chasing greatness. He was it. In Kinshasa, the cleanup began. Posters peeled, vendors packed, the drums faded. Mobutu claimed victory in every direction. He had brought Africa to the center of the world, if only for a moment. And in that moment, he stood close enough to Ali to catch some of the light. But the people saw through it. They always had. Ali was the real sun. A week later, Ali stood on a rooftop in New York. Midday, jacket open, no entourage. A reporter asked him, "What do you want people to remember?" He didn't blink. That I didn't run. That I stood up. That I took everything they threw at me and smiled. He paused. And that I never stopped being me. In gyms across America, young boys practiced rope-a-dope on bags too big for their frames. In prison yards, men recited Ali's lines like scripture. In universities, professors debated the socio-political implications of a boxing match in a dictatorship. Ali was everywhere, and for once, no one could deny him. The fight was over, but something had started. Ali's fists were done talking. Now the silence began to echo. Children in Kinshasa still pointed to the stadium when they walked by. Ali was here. They'd whisper, like he was a ghost or a prophet or both. In Harlem, a mural appeared overnight. Spray painted on brick. Ali, arms raised, painted in gold. The eyes followed you down the street. In villages across Africa, radios crackled his name. In America, parents named their sons after him. Not because he boxed, but because he stood. The myth had roots now. Not built by newspapers or promoters, but by people. Everywhere. Ali was no longer just a man. He was motion. He was music. He was defiance wrapped in joy. Foreman stayed gone. For months, then years. He didn't return to the spotlight, didn't give interviews, didn't explain the loss. He became a question, and for many, he became the necessary shadow, because legends need a fall to rise from. And Ali had risen. Ali spoke softer now. He let others argue about the fight, who won each round, what tactics were used, whether it was luck. He smiled when asked. "I rope-a-dope the world," he'd say, and then he'd wink, like a magician who knew the trick still worked. But under the charm, He was changing. Kinshasa had taken something from him, or maybe revealed something. He walked slower now, talked longer, laughed more quietly, because winning in Zaire wasn't just a victory, it was a vindication. Every insult, every banquet, every year stolen by exile, all of it answered, without bitterness. He started visiting schools, prisons, told kids to believe in something, told inmates they were more than their sentence. He was still the loudest man in any room. But the volume had weight now. It wasn't just noise, it was permission. America began to change too. Networks aired the fight again and again. Teachers showed it in classrooms. Commentators stopped calling him controversial. Now he was wise. A poet. A statesman. The same mouths that had once condemned him now quoted him. Ali didn't flinch. He knew the rules of the game. He had broken them anyway. He kept fighting. Inside the ring, his body began to slow. But the myth didn't. He beat Frazier again, then Norton. And when the time came, he lost too. But each win, each loss added another layer, because the crowd wasn't watching to see if he'd win anymore. They were watching to remember who he was. One night, years later, a boy in Louisville asked him, "Were you scared of Foreman?" Ali knelt down. "Scared?" he said, smiling. "I was terrified." The boy blinked. "But I didn't let him know. I made fear my friend." He stood. "And then I beat it." That's what the legacy became. Not just strength, but knowing when to show it, and when to hide it, and when to turn it into something no one could predict. That was Ali, the man who became story, and then became something more. Some legends fade. Ali didn't. He settled into memory like moonlight, quiet, consistent, untouchable. Even when he was still alive, people spoke of him like he was already a statue. There were no more wars to fight in the ring. His body slowed, his voice softened, his steps lost the bounce. But the image, the myth, it only grew sharper. Children who hadn't seen him box still mimicked his shuffle in schoolyards. Old men spoke of him with the reverence saved for saints or rebels. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a lesson, a rhythm, a warning, and a song. In Zaire, now Congo again, the stadium still stood. Weeds grew where drums once echoed. The paint faded. The steel rusted. But the ring? It lived on. Locals brought their sons there. "This is where it happened," they'd whisper. Not just the fight, but the fire, the roar, the story. George Foreman, years later, would return, not to fight, but to forgive. He stood in that same stadium, alone, and placed his hand on a ring post. And for a long moment, he didn't move. He told a reporter, "This place broke me, but it also began something." He smiled. "And it gave me Ali." Ali, meanwhile, kept moving. Even as Parkinson stole his speech, his tremble became a kind of punctuation. Each gesture carried meaning. Each look felt deliberate. He would walk into a room, and it would shift. Not out of pity, out of presence. At the 1996 Olympics, they called him forward to light the flame. He emerged from the dark, torch in hand, shaking, but steady. The stadium fell silent. And when the fire bloomed, thousands wept. Because it wasn't just Ali lighting that flame. It was every man who'd ever felt silenced. Every exile, every underdog, every believer. He rarely spoke now, but when he did, it landed. A nod, a raised glove, a slow smile. Sometimes that was enough to fill a room. Because by then, the myth had become something deeper. Ali wasn't just the greatest. He was ours. Fans wrote letters in every language. Children drew his face in school projects. Strangers called out his name in airports, hoping just for a glance. He met presidents, kings, prisoners, and in each handshake, he gave something real. Not performance, not distance, not nostalgia, but dignity. He could no longer dance. So the world danced for him. He could no longer preach. So his silence became scripture. He could no longer throw a punch. But his existence still hit like one. One day in Louisville, a woman walked up to him in a diner. She said nothing, just placed a baby in his arms. Ali looked down. The child stared back. And then, slowly, Ali smiled, lifted his hand, and gently tapped the baby's nose. The room applauded. No one knew why. They just felt it. Because by then, Ali didn't have to explain himself. He was explanation. He was the moment, the past, the present, the pulse of something that refused to die. He spoke less now, but the world leaned closer. Because when a man like Ali slows down, everything around him listens harder. His hands, once fast as lightning, trembled in the morning. His voice, once the music of rebellion, cracked when he tried to speak. And still, he glowed, not in a bright, burning way anymore, but like fireflies in the dark. Software patient, persistent. People came from everywhere to see him. Not for advice, not for autographs, but to witness something, to sit near him, to feel whatever it was that had moved the earth in 1974 and never quite stopped humming. He went to schools where children didn't know boxing, but they knew Ali. They giggled at his shadowboxing. They held his hand like he was a grandfather and a superhero in one. Sometimes he would nod. Sometimes he would smile. Sometimes he would say nothing at all. And somehow, that meant even more. There were hard days, too. His body betrayed him. His legs wobbled. His breath shortened. The tremors deepened. But he kept showing up, kept moving. Slowly, yes, but never backwards. Because Ali had never been about escape. He was about presence. One afternoon, at a museum in Washington, he stood before an exhibit of himself. Photos, gloves, quotes painted on the wall. He looked at his own image, young, golden, undefeated. Then turned to his wife and whispered, "He's a good-looking guy." She laughed. And for a moment, so did the world. In airports, strangers still approached him. Some brought books. Others brought memories. "My dad met you in Vietnam. You helped me through prison. My son wants to be like you." He'd shake their hand, tap their shoulder, wink. And that was enough. Because somehow, even when he said little, Ali still spoke. His house in Kentucky became a kind of shrine, not in a sad way, not like a tomb, but like a well. People came to draw from it, to sit, to reflect. They brought stories, photos, children, and always, they left different. He lit one more Olympic flame. He gave one more speech in slow, thunderous rhythm. And then, one day, the world felt a stillness. Like when music stops before you realize the song is over. When he passed, the world didn't cry in one loud wave. It cried in a million soft moments, in whispers, in closed eyes, in slow nods, on front porches and stadiums and barbershops. Because he had been with us for so long, we didn't quite know how to let go. Bill Clinton stood at his funeral. So did Billy Crystal. So did 1,000 strangers. The service was full of laughter and stories and silence. A man spoke. Ali didn't leave us. He joined us. In every place we need courage. Outside the service, two boys shadowboxed on the sidewalk. One whispered, "I'm Ali." The other grinned, "I'm Foreman." And they danced around their memories of something they'd never seen. He was gone now, but he didn't feel gone. He felt like breath in the trees, like rhythm in footsteps, like the echo of drums long after the music ends. Ali was still in the ring, only now, he wasn't fighting. He was reminding us why he ever did. Some names fade, others echo. Ali didn't echo. He remained, even when the headlines changed, when the years piled up, when the world moved on. His name held. Not like a statue, but like a heartbeat. Across cities he'd never walked in, his name was on murals. Ali in Havana, Ali in Johannesburg, Ali in Manila, a raised fist, a dancing stance, a gaze that dared the sky. Even where his words were never heard, his silence meant something. In classrooms, teachers spoke of resistance, of poetry, of rhythm, and someone would always whisper, "Like Ali." The room would nod, even if the children didn't know the rules of boxing, because the rules of Ali were different. He fought when he shouldn't have, spoke when he was told to shut up, smiled when the world waited for rage, and that's why he stayed. Foreman, years later, would call him the kindest man he'd ever known. Even when he mocked me, he'd say, I felt like he loved me. That was the strange alchemy of Ali. He could break you and still leave you grateful. His daughters told stories of bedtime shadowboxing, of giant hands tying little shoelaces, of the same voice that shook presidents, whispering lullabies. He was fierce and gentle, stubborn and forgiving. A contradiction? A complete man. There were statues, museums, streets bearing his name. But the real monument was quieter. It lived in conversations between fathers and sons, in poems half remembered, in school reports that turned into lifelong admiration. It lived in fists raised by people who had never been in a ring, but knew what it meant to stand alone. Ali's name became more than syllables. It became shorthand for courage, for rhythm, for fire with a smile. You didn't have to know the fights. You didn't have to know the dates. You just had to feel what he meant. At one point, a child in a refugee camp in Jordan was asked who his hero was. He didn't hesitate. Muhammad Ali, he said. The translator asked, Do you know what he did? The boy shook his head. Number. But he looks like he believes in me. That's what survived. Not the knockouts, not the belts, not the press conferences, but the belief. Ali believed in his own worth before the world did. And in doing so, he taught the world to do the same. In the end, when they carved his name into marble, it was already etched elsewhere. In graffiti on subway walls, ink on forearms, in the way someone walks into a room and refuses to shrink. Muhammad Ali, not just the greatest boxer, the greatest version of what a man could be when he refuses to bend. One name, forever. It didn't end with silence. It ended with a bell, one last echo, like the universe exhaling. And then, stillness. The ring was long gone. The ropes, the lights, the noise, all vanished into history. But something remained. Something unmeasured, unscored, unbeaten. Ali had stood there once, under African skies, hands raised, eyes closed, chest heaving like a storm just passed. Now there was no crowd, just the memory of one. Not faded, not even dimmed, just folded, like a flag kept safe until needed again. In Louisville, the church filled slowly, not with fans, but with witnesses. Some wore suits, others wore jeans, all carried stories. One man brought a photo, another brought silence. A woman clutched a glove her father once got signed in '76. No one told them what to feel. They already knew. The imam recited verses. The rabbi spoke after. Then a priest. Then a poet. Ali had made space for them all. And now they made space for him. In a small corner of Kinshasa, an old radio crackled. A boy sat cross-legged listening. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the weight in the air. The streets had changed. The world had changed. But Ali still meant something. In Harlem, a barber paused mid-trim. In Manila, a man knelt and whispered thanks. In Tehran, a teenager punched the air in slow motion. Ali's last fight had ended long ago. But his last round, this one, was still being lived. And then came the procession. The slow movement of a people saying goodbye. Not just to a boxer, to an era, to a figure they thought might never fade. Will Smith helped carry the casket. So did Lennox Lewis. So did Mike Tyson. 3 generations of fighters. One shared grief. No one tried to make sense of it, because Ali had never been about logic. He was about light. Even when his voice was gone, even when his fists had stilled, he lit fires in people's lives that still burned. Back in Zaire, now the Congo, the stadium was cracked, faded. But the ring still existed, not in wood or metal, but in memory. Ali stood there forever, arms out, eyes defiant. A statue that didn't need marble. That night somewhere, a kid shadowboxed in his bedroom. He didn't know the exact story. He didn't need to. He felt the rhythm. He heard the whisper, and he answered it. The bell rang, not to end something, but to remind us that it once began. And in that echo, Ali lives.